Hello and welcome to what I believe is episode 16 of the Kingfisher Knits podcast. My name is Madeleine. I'm talking to you from my home in Zurich in Switzerland. This is where I live with my husband and our two small children. I will put links down below for where you can find me on the internet, and also all the show notes will be included down below in the description box. But I am Madeleine Windsor on Instagram, on Ravelry, and I'm Kingfisher Knits pretty much everywhere else. So certainly here on YouTube and on Instagram and Twitter. Not that I use Twitter. So it is 3 weeks since I last spoke to you. I had really hoped and scheduled to do a podcast last week, so I would have my usual 2 weeks between podcasts. But illness of children conspired with the fact that we then had guests coming, and it just wasn't something that I could find the time to do. So I'm coming to you a bit later on in the month, and the reality is I probably will not be able to podcast again until January, because then Christmas kicks in, family time and preparations, celebrations, and New Year and the like. So that's okay, but I'm a little sad that it just means that there'll be these sort of two larger gaps between podcasts, but c'est la vie. I'm also a little bit sad that I haven't podcasted for 3 weeks, but I do not have a ton of stuff to show you. That's because much of those 3 weeks were spent looking after either myself feeling unwell. I mean, I'm still not feeling 100%, but I don't know. I'd rather just be properly ill for a few days. But I haven't been properly ill. I've never been so ill that I couldn't get out of bed or, take care of myself and the kids. But I've been feeling under the weather, and it's been for a really long time. Kids have been more ill on and off, and then we had guests, and as I said, so actually knitting time has been really, really scarce. But I still have a few things I'd like to talk to you about, and I certainly couldn't go until Christmas without recording a podcast. So I will say that as is seasonal here, it's fairly grey outside here in Zurich. We have had some great weather, great wintry weather, so it's been cold. We had some first smatterings of snow which melted, then we have quite a good dump of snow which has unfortunately now melted, and it keeps trying to snow, but we're hovering around a few degrees centigrade, so it tends to melt very fast, which is disappointing for me. I like it when it's all white, but it means it's very grey, and I have got several lights on inside today because otherwise it's ridiculous. I think that will mean that colours and things will look a bit funny. I'll try and explain things the best I can, but that's just what we've got to live with right now. I do have a couple of things I wanted to say at the top of the episode. As I mentioned first in my last episode, there is currently the Indie Design Gift Along, or GAL, going on Ravelry. It's an awful lot of fun. I've been hopping in and out of the threads, and I did cast on something for the GAL. I haven't brought it along even to show you now because I've made so little progress. It looks ridiculous. It's a hat. It's the Drummershee hat from Emily Williams. I really, really love it. I'm going to be finishing it off, but it was something that involved concentrating on charts, and given that knitting time was almost non-existent, I did not do that. I have not been knitting on that. So again, I'm a bit disappointed in that, but I have to accept what the current situation is. So that Indie-Gal is currently going on. I will put links for it down below. The point is, there was a sale at the beginning, which was the week that I last podcast, where you could pick up patterns from the designers which are taking part. But you can knit any pattern from the current designers taking part. I would say there's certainly still time. It's designed as a gift along, so people tend to focus on small knits, and the gift along, the knit along part, or knit or crochet along part, runs until the end of the year, until December 31st. And there are tons of prizes up for grabs. There are prizes up for grabs every day, also just in the threads if you reply. And if you reply with pictures of whips in time and stuff, it's a lot of fun. And so I certainly recommend checking it out, especially if you plan to maybe be knitting some things anyway. It can be worth checking out if, let's say, some little gift knits that you were going to do are patterns which belong to some of the designers, and then you can take part. It's a great annual tradition now. This is the 5th year that it's been running, and the first year that I have been able to take part as a designer. I am running the Garment Firsts Cal in my Ravelry group. Links will be down below. And the point of that is to knit a garment It is supposed to be an adult garment, though one of the entries, or one of the proposed entries, was for 2 young child sweaters, and I said that that would certainly count as an adult garment. And the idea is to have something about it that's new to you. So either a technique you haven't used, or at least a technique you haven't used in making a sweater, or a jumper, or a cardigan, or whatever kind of garment you want to make. Or if it's your first garment, that counts, of course, or the first time you made a cardigan rather than a sweater. I think you catch my drift. I've got a couple of garments on the go, both of which would qualify for the first. Not that I qualify for my own cal, but I'm knitting along in the spirit. And somebody who contacted me who said that who was very experienced and had done all kinds of different garments and things. And I just said, well, for me, it's enough if you knit a garment from a designer you've never knit one of their garment patterns before. So there's lots and lots of ways to qualify. That is running. It is open-ended, and I will probably wrap that up at some point in the new year, but no, I'm in no hurry whatsoever. So that's going to run, I would say, at least the length of January. Not least because I'm not finished up with my garments either. I also have a couple of cals, running in my group for some of my designs, so you can check them out if you're currently knitting the Stracciatella shawl, which was a kit I did with Nora George. Then there is a cal going on for that. I'm decided to extend deadlines because quite a few people picked up kits when they went to see from a festival in the UK, so I wanted to give everybody the opportunity to join in. And there is also a cal running for my Artemis shawl, which was a collaboration I did with Trailers Yarn. All the details will be down below. So I'm going to jump into whips. I'm only showing a couple of whips this week, but both things that I have probably been knitting on the most, and things that I'm really happy to be knitting on, so thoroughly appropriate. The first is a garment, so it is my Arboreal Sweater. The Arboreal Sweater is a beautiful colourwork yoke sweater. It is from Jennifer Steingass she's also known as knit.love.wool on Instagram, and I think her Ravelry store is actually called knit.love.wool, but her name is Jennifer Steingass. Of course I'm getting a lot of glare, but this is the beautiful sweater here, and I'm knitting it very similar. I'm just knitting it using a lighter blue. I think actually there she's using not white, but there's a light blue and a dark blue. I'm using a natural white and a sky blue. So just quickly to remind people, I didn't bother pronouncing last time, but I'm knitting this out of this yarn here. I don't really know how to pronounce it. Let's get it so you haven't got horrible glare on it. There we go. This is yarn that I bought from an online yarn store in France, which is called, I think, Ile de Lin. Again, pronunciation. But the yarn itself is from the Faroe Islands, and it is a blend of Faroe Island and Falkland Merino wool. It's a proper yarn, let's say, for what's the word? Colour work. In that it's it's a grippy yarn. It's more rustic. It is soft enough that it's not prickly or rough, but it's not super soft, and it is non-superwash. I actually don't know from looking at it if to me it doesn't really look woolen spun, which is what I would say is really proper stranded colourwork yarn. It's a 3-ply yarn. I just can't tell. To me, it looks smooth. It's not really fluffy, so I would say it's a worsted spun, but I probably should actually check that. Often it says on Ravelry yarn pages if things are worsted or woolen spun, but not always. Anyway, I did my swatch, and it blocks out beautifully. The stitches all plump up and fill up, any gaps, and I was really happy with the swatch. So I am knitting size B, which I think is a 36 bust measurement, and I'm done with the colourwork. It's really hard to show it off because it's on one needle. I'm about to separate for the sleeves, so I don't want to transfer it onto another needle because I'm about to lose a good chunk of stitches anyway. But perhaps I can hold it up, and if I show you mostly this area, which is more stretched out, and bunch up the rest down here. This is the neck up here, and I have done all of the colour work. So starting from up here, I'll show you that way around. It's really beautiful. My colourwork skills are not great. I'm not particularly totally in love with how it looks. I can see how it looks in general, and I'm hoping that blocking will do some wonders. Anyway, so that's all, and all the increases are made up here. You know, in the yoke, you can see here that there's some clear shaping immediately going on here from the beginning. So this is in the natural white undyed colour from this this yarn, and the blue, which is now going to be all for all of the rest of the sweater, is the sky blue colourway. And I have done the short rows. You can't really tell, but there's, you know, more blue here than there is over here. So I've done the short rows which run sort of across the back after the yoke, and I believe after separating for the sleeves there are even more short rows. This is all in order to raise the back of the neck, as you would like to have in a normal sweater. So from now on, it is, apart from still some more short rows, it's basically round and round and round. So I'm really looking forward to that, being some relaxing, easy knitting that I can pick up and knit over the festive season, so that I, you know, now will not be needing to look at the chart and what have you. So I was really motivated to get that beyond the yoke, and I'm really, 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 really glad that I have. I think it's a beautiful, beautiful sweater, and I couldn't recommend it more. I mean, the pattern itself is actually, it's very simple. I haven't come across any problems with it. So far, I haven't finished it. So far, nothing but positive comments. That's living in my Foxes project bag. And I'm just really looking forward to getting those sleeves separated off and whizzing down the body. So that is whip number 1. I'm just going to take a sip of my tea because I have had a tendency to have a frog in my throat recently, and I don't want to suddenly have an embarrassing coughing fit. My other project that I'm working on right now is living in this little project bag which I made, and this is a project which I haven't shown you before. So at first I'm going to show you the yarn. This is yarn, I'm just seeing if I've got the tag, but I'm not sure I do. I do. This is yarn from Knitting in France. I have spoken about Knitting in France in the past. She is an indie dyer based in France, although the dyer herself, she is originally from Iceland. And I believe, from what I can remember, certainly, that this is the first hand-dyed yarn I ever bought. Not this particular skein, but from this dyer. I really like her yarn. I have made my first ever self-published pattern was knit out of her yarn that I had bought. I contacted her and got some yarn support to do another pattern. So my Antonia shawl is the first ever self-published design that I ever released, which is on Ravelry, which is to use up a single skein of sock yarn that's, you know, too special to go on your feet. So I made that out of a merino cashmere nylon blend yarn that I bought from her. She provided me with yarn for my Fragolina hat and cowl set, which is also available on Ravelry. In the photo of that, it has a lovely little girl, a friend of the family, a friend of my daughter's, wearing both the hat, which is kind of a beret style, and the cowl, but in the pattern they're actually sized for also up to adult sizes. So you've got child, you've got sort of younger child teen, and full adult sizes there in the pattern. At some point I wonder if I should knit another one of that and take some photos of an adult wearing them. Anyway, I digress. That was out of beautiful cashmere, merino cashmere blend Aran weight wool, which was lovely. And I've continued to buy yarn from her. I also made my soubrette cardigan, which is a lace weight cardigan, which I've shown off. I was wearing it in my very first episode, I believe. First or second episode of this podcast, if you care to go back and take a look. It's a beautiful, beautiful cardigan, and the yarn was fantastic. So I have a soft spot. She's probably apart from, I also obviously have a strong link now with Nora George yarns, having worked with her yarn a lot. But I worked with Knitting in France yarn right from the very beginning of when I discovered indie dye yarn. This is a really long way to explain that I feel a link there to Knitting in France. And when she announced a couple of months ago, that she was going to be closing down her Etsy shop, it wasn't sustainable for her, I was understanding and I was upset. And I said to her, look, if there's anything that I can help with. And back then she had a lot of support and she decided to keep on trying. and certainly to keep on dyeing things that she already had in stock and the like. And so what I said to her was, given that I had already done a couple of designs using her yarn, that I'd be happy to do kits with those with her, for example, and especially that I would be really happy to make a new knitting pattern, which maybe would be released first exclusively in kits that she would sell, and that I would actually donate those patterns to her. So in a way that she can, by selling those kits, get a little bit more revenue towards her yarn shop. And especially, I think the point is, she needs to make it more sustainable for her. And for her, that means also to get off of Etsy and to have her own website and the like. Excuse me, I just realised that I was in the middle of a row. So while I finished off talking about that, I was just finishing my row, and we're almost ready. Anyway, so this is the design which I knew kind of straight away that what I was going to do, that it was going to be a hat design, because I had some yarn of hers already. I didn't want her to have to send me more yarn. And it's a DK. I had this DK weight yarn from her here. So it's Merino DK, 100% superwash merino, standard put up there. She calls it red and pink speckles. And really it's pink with red speckles. So it's this lovely pink yarn. It's only slightly getting a bit of reflection off there, blown out, but the colours you're seeing, apart from where you see the reflection, the colour is accurate. And if I hold it up closer, you can see, I would say it doesn't only have red speckles. It looks like there's some navy in there, unless, I don't know, red breaks and can leave out some navy. I guess it depends what red you're using. And maybe there's some pink speckles, or maybe it's just the red mixing. I don't know. I'm not a dyer. I should stop talking about this stuff. I have no idea, but I like it. And I have got this far, which is, I've been knitting this hat here. So I'm knitting quite a large and slouchy size. I'm knitting the largest size that I'm going to be putting in the pattern, because I tend to knit the smallest or medium size when I knit my hats, because I knit them for my daughter or for myself. I don't have a huge head and I don't tend to wear slouchy hats, but I decided to knit this one in the biggest size because I wanted to give it a go. Maybe I'll like it once I love the design, but maybe I'll like the slouchy look once I've finished a hat that I actually knit with a slouchy look. I don't know. I just don't tend to like ones I pick up in shops to put on my head, which are meant to be slouchy. I tend to find I look ridiculous. Anyway, so it's got a beautiful cable pattern. It's very, very simple. I have used a garter rib down at the bottom, which I thought was really pretty. I mean, I would say in the pattern, if you want to use a 2x2 rib, that's absolutely fine. I think this makes it look a little bit prettier, maybe a touch more feminine. I actually think, ignoring the yarn, this design is perfectly unisex. So perhaps in a man's hat, you would want to just make this just a 2x2 rib. Anyway, I'll be showing this to you again. It will be finished very soon, and so by the time next time I podcast, it will be all finished and done. And because I'm the kind of idiot, I don't mind putting on a hat while it's on the needles. I think a friend of mine took a picture of me sitting on the tram in Zurich the other day wearing my hat like this as I was knitting on it. So there, you can see I like it. It's got some nice fun texture to it. It's easy to knit, but it's not boring. It's a good way to use a yarn with a bit of variegation, I would say. That it's still, you don't lose the pattern, because somehow by this added texture, everything sort of pops out, and I think it's going to look really nice with a bit of slouch. Maybe even nice on me. Anyway, so there we go. Oh, now I'm tangled in my yarn. Excuse me. There we go. So I'm having a lot of fun knitting on that. The yarn is beautiful. This is a proper, nice, it's got a plumpness to it, but it's got quite a solid look to it, which is again why I was sure once I pulled it out that I wanted to knit something with cables. But something not just plain and that maybe you've seen before, but still nothing complicated whatsoever. So anybody could give it a go, even if you've not done cables before. There's just one type of cable in here. It's always the same cable. So that will be finished soon, and I look forward to showing it to you when it's done. Those are all of my whips for today. We're definitely not in California. And I do have one FO to show you. I was so totally positive that this was going to be a complete FO, which to me means ends woven in, blocked, and the like. But I just didn't have the time. Again, I was really busy, and then we had guests, and this is a very sizable piece of knitting. Blocking it requires time and space to leave it out, and that was not remotely possible, that we would have had people needing to trample over where I would normally block them. So it just hasn't been possible but I have finished. I'm not going to try showing it to you now that it's not blocked, because it just is not going to look, it's not going to look right until it's blocked. So I'm just going to be showing you that I have finished, I have bound off, you can see, my beautiful, beautiful 3 skein shawl project and 3 base project from Stranded, from using yarn from Stranded Dyeworks. So this is a collaboration I'm doing with Amy from Stranded Dyeworks, also Amy of the Stranded podcast. I've spoken about this in the past, and the concept behind this was I definitely wanted to do a shawl design for her, which would be great for some fun kits to put together and to make it lots of, I mean, Amy to me just seems so fun, and she knits with all kinds of yarn and all kinds of bases and all weights and projects. So I immediately had this idea that I would love to try and mix 3 different bases, and she's also an indie yarn dyer. She's not the only one by any means, but she's an indie yarn dyer who frequently has you know, different bases in her shop. So it just seemed really, really appropriate. And in this shawl, so I will hold it up and show you a little bit more in a minute, we have 3 skeins. One is a fingering weight skein, so which you can see here. I used Mettlesome. One is a skein of her drift mohair, which is a lace weight kid mohair silk blend, which you can see here, and this is in her Shiner colourway. And then I used a skein of DK weight yarn as well, and this particular one is her Magpie colourway, which you can see here on the border. So I'm just going to show you it like this, so you can see that there is a lot of fun to be had in this shawl. It starts up here, and it's not blocked, and this is a half pie shawl. Half pie shawls are sort of, I would think, particularly for me, notorious for not looking quite right until they're blocked. I mean, also a pie shawl is like that. It tends to want to come together and doesn't lie into a perfect circle, and this won't lie into a perfect half circle until it's finished. I'm also actually going to make a couple of adjustments, which I think will make it a little bit better when it's finished, in the final pattern, I mean. So you can see here that you have plenty of colour changes, because it will depend. I mean, in this case, the yarns are not massively different in colour, but you could certainly choose things which are more contrasting for more stripe. You've got parts where you hold, you do eyelets, parts where it's knitting, parts where you've got garter bumps, and you kind of got bits where you hold the yarn together. This is my absolute favourite, where you hold the fingering weight together with the lace weight mohair. It was an awful lot of fun to knit this. And for the size of shawl that it gives you at the end, so this is the point. You have 3 skeins of yarn, which sounds scary, but it's, I mean, a lot of people I think have knit 3 skein fingering weight shawls. This is much less yardage actually, because it is 1 skein of fingering weight yarn, 1 50-gram skein of lace weight yarn. So it's another, that's 400 yards, but it's not 800 yards like you might, like you would expect for a 100-gram skein of a lace weight yarn. It's only a 50-gram skein, and then you have a 100-gram skein of DK weight, and that's 200 meters. So it's less yardage than you might expect. It's probably similar to some 3 skein fingering weight projects out there. But given that you've got, I'm just going to hold it up a bit like this so you get a bit more of the effect. You get a really, really sizable shawl, and that's obviously because I've used eyelets, which open things up. But given that you've got lace weight there, it's a lot of yardage there. So I'm still wondering if people would be interested in it also being a smaller size shawl in the pattern, which probably would be easier to adapt. Of course, in that way you end up with more leftovers. So I like, this is a beautiful shawl kit. It'll come with 3 beautiful skeins of yarn, and you want to use them up. I mean, there are still enough leftovers for you to put some in your scrap yarn blanket, for example. But there will probably be an option that will not be totally different, but maybe we just do away with a bit here and add the border in a bit sooner, and you just have more leftover of all of the yarns. So I'm really, really, really loving this finished object, and I cannot wait to block it. So I desperately have to get it blocked in the next week so that it's done before Christmas, and I can fold it all up and put it away safe, and then show it to you in its final glory at the end. So I didn't actually say the name of the fingering weight base I use. I'm using her Oasis fingering base, which is her 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon. Oh, right. So that is everything for whips and FOs. I knew this was going to be a shorter podcast, totally fine with that. But for a while now, I've been putting off talking about something I wanted to talk about, which is something that all podcasters seem to do at some point. and I don't think it's talking about socks. Sorry, talking about hand knit socks. And I always thought, well, it would be nice to show the socks I've knit. And at the same time, I thought, well, I mean, lots of podcasters do this, and they have way more socks to show, and way more things to say, and way more interesting information to give. So why should I do it? But then I always love watching these segments on people's podcasts where they show off the socks that they've knit, things that they've learned, little tips. And while I don't learn anything revelationary anymore, probably, every time I hear something that interests me. So I just figured, well, I'll do it and maybe it will help someone. And if not, it's still some place where I've shown off all the socks. And I was particularly, let's say, tipped into doing this week was because on the Get Your Yarn Wishes Granted hashtag on Instagram, which I spoke about also last time, I had asked, which of course is not really a yarn wish, but I didn't need any yarn, really. What I was interested in was some sock blockers. And one of my Instagram friends, who is donnarossa, that's Italian for, well, literally red lady, she is actually Swiss. She lives here in Zurich, and her name is Sabrina. She's a designer as well, and she dropped over to my house last week a pair of sock blockers that she said that she didn't need, and so she was very happy to give them to me. For me, I don't think that sock blockers are that necessary an item. I have never felt, oh gosh, I wish I had sock blockers for blocking my socks. I have thought, however, that it would be nice for taking photos, for showing on the podcast when one's finished a pair of socks, and potentially in the future. I mean, I do have a couple of design ideas for socks. I just haven't ventured that way yet. And I kind of thought also you need some sock blockers when you're going to make a pattern, you know, and take nice photos. Anyway, so these I think are meant to be size 39, which is the size foot I have, which is a UK 6. Maybe that's a US size 7. Anyway, EU size 39. But Sabrina had warned me that in her opinion these were a bit short. These probably are more like a 38, but I figured it's okay. Like, it will still show off the design on the pattern. The design or the beautiful yarn or whatever it is you're trying to show off with your sock. Alright, so I have sock blockers, which means I can put a sock on a blocker and show it to you and talk to you about it. So I've just pulled out all of my socks, which is not very many. I have not knit, you know, tens and tens of pairs of socks. I think in total, I haven't ever counted up, I mean, not including baby socks, which I've knit a fair few of. I think I've knit at least 10 pairs of socks, but I've knit some for my daughter. So at least 2 pairs I haven't pulled out, which are for my daughter. I've knit pairs for my father, I've knit pairs for my brother, and pairs for friends. So I've got at least 6, maybe more pairs of socks that I've knit, which I'm not showing here. I also have socks which are currently in the laundry. So this is not all of them, but it's definitely a good representation of what I have knit. So I'm going to start off with the very first sock that I knit, which is not true. The first sock I knit was a sport weight sock for my brother. I knit them like ski socks. I used up all the yarn that I had, which was a 150 gram ball of a Regia 6-ply yarn, which is their sport yarn. That was fun. It was the self-striping, and I believe he uses them. Not right now because he's in Australia and it's really hot, but he does use them. One thing I will say is that I find I wear my socks, okay? And I don't know. I mean, some people say they're really hard on their socks. I do walk around just wearing socks in the house sometimes. I try not to, mostly because then they get dirty in a way that they don't really need to. Because I find that you can wear hand knit socks several days, maybe not always in a row, but if you wear them and lie them out to air out, they don't smell or need washing like store-bought socks do. But if you let them get all dirty underneath because you walk around your house with them on and you have kids, so your floor is of course dirty, doesn't matter how much you try and clean them, they get dirty and you have to wash them. Anyway, long-winded way to say, I don't know if it's because I wear my socks a lot and I wear them in all my shoes, and sometimes the dye which is inside the leather of the shoes might transfer onto them. I find the underside of my socks, especially in light coloured yarn like this one I'm about to show you gets really grubby. These have been washed. They still have got a lot of colour here, as you can see. I'm not blaming the yarn for that. I think that that's just, it's a light coloured yarn. They get a bit grubby underneath and that's how it is. So I guess I'm apologising for that, but hey, that's how they are. Anyway, these, and you can see that they're a little bit longer than the sock blocker. These are the first socks I ever knit. They have been washed and dried recently, not on blockers, which is why they're all a bit crinkly here because they just dried however I happened to lay them out after they came out of the washing machine. These are knit in Eden Cottage Yarns Milburn 4-ply in the Blossom colourway. This is a discontinued colourway. And this pattern is the My Cup of Tea socks. It's a free pattern on Ravelry. These socks, this yarn is a 85% superwash BFL, 15% silk. It has a lovely, lovely feel to it. It is definitely a finer fingering weight yarn, and not in terms of the put up, because I think with BFL, I'm trying to think, being the way it is, it's not a yarn which occupies a lot of space. The fibres all lie long fibres and they lie flat, so you don't get this big fluffy, load of yarn where you get a lot of yardage for the weight, how much it weighs. This is the universal symbol for weight. So it's a denser fibre, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So for having a sort of a decent put up, you end up quite decent put up in terms of yardage. You end up with quite a thin yarn. I knit this on 2mm needles according to the pattern. It was tricky for me because it was my first time using needles that were so small, using yarn that was slippery. I was using metal needles. I had some fun with this, but I do love the way it came out. They're a bit longer than a lot of the other ones that I've knit myself. I really enjoy wearing them inside my boots. It had a heel flap and gusset. You can see there's already felting and stuff going on there, which I put down to my boots. But in general, I mean, I love wearing them. I didn't absolutely love knitting them, but it was my first time doing lots of different things to do with socks. So there we go. And I do really like the pattern that you get on the front of the sock. So looks like that. So I have nothing. I think the yarn is great. For me, I wouldn't knit socks with this yarn base again, because to get a nice dense fabric, you have to knit it on small needles. I do not enjoy using 2mm needles. My sock needle of choice now is a 2.5mm needle. And for that reason, given that socks should be knit at a decently tight gauge, I don't think that I would use this to knit socks again. That does not mean that it cannot be used, and it just depends how you are. For me, I'm a loose-ish knitter. To get a tight enough gauge with this yarn, I need a 2mm needle. That's just how it is. But I have a sweater's quantity of this yarn, and I will be making a cardigan with it at some point in the future. So, pair of socks number 1. The second pair of socks I finished were out of commercial sock yarn, which I kind of wanted to do quite early on to see the difference and what have you. And I didn't love knitting with this particular commercial sock yarn. This is Wendy, a Wendy sock yarn. I think it's called Roam, as in R-O-A-M, to roam about. And this is a yarn which has, you can see it has a colour change going on. It has heathering going on also, and it was quite splitty and it stuck to itself. It's made great socks at the end of the day. These have a really nice, they're fairly dense, and I didn't have to struggle to do that. I think I used 2.25s. I might have even used 2.5s. I will link my Ravelry project page. I made these shorter because I was feeling lazy, I guess, and believe this is a fish lips kiss heel because, yeah, it is. This is a fish lips, sorry, fluff. These are clean out of the washing machine, but somehow they still get stuff that sticks to them. This was my first attempt at a fish lips kiss heel. These were cuffed down, as were the last pair. And I discovered, so this particular pair I knit according to the pattern, which I believe is a 64 stitch cast on. This, I think, I would have to look at the project page. I think I also did a 64 stitch, and this is probably when I realised that, and I then measured my foot and everything, and realised that my foot, while I'm a size 6, I have very narrow feet and fairly narrow ankles, and I don't need that many stitches, so I don't use this many stitches anymore. I still wear these a lot because they're hard wearing, they are comfortable, and they just bag a little bit, but they're short, so it's not that they're like falling all the way down my leg and annoying me. They stay put where they have to. I don't adore this colourway, but I don't hate it either. I don't remember how I got this yarn. I think my mum had picked it up for me. So it's a 75-25 wool nylon blend. I didn't enjoy knitting with it that much because, as I said, it was a bit splitty. I mean, now that I've knit with Regia 4-ply and Opal 4-ply, they were much more pleasant for me to knit with. So I wouldn't really massively recommend this. I think it's the way it's plied. It's kind of got a barber pole effect, and that other colour that you can always see running through the other just tended to kind of try and split from the other one. But at the end of the day, you get very good socks. I've worn these an awful lot. Yes, they've got a bunch of fluff stuck to them now, but they have areas where they're a little bit more worn on the heel and what have you, and a little bit under the foot. You can feel that it's a bit more compact than the rest. But these have been worn a lot and they get washed a lot. So they were my first pair, and they were a bit shorter. My first pair of commercial socks, commercial sock yarn socks. Excuse me, I will just take a sip. You can see I got them to match as well, and that made me feel very clever. This was the first time I ever had needed to think about trying to match something. So that made me feel quite clever, as I said. Not that makes me clever, but you know. So the next pair of socks that I knit were toe-up socks. So when I knit my very first ever pair of socks, they were the sport weight socks for my brother. Those I knit toe-up. I used a pattern from Very Pink Knits, and that was a lot of, That was a lot of fun. It was quite easy to do, but in her patterns, as you'll know from if you see her tutorials, she does her toe-up socks by making, you cast on, you make a provisional cast on, you knit this section kind of, you know, akin to how you would knit a heel, basically. Yes, like you would knit a heel. And then you pick up the stitches from the provisional cast on edge you've knit to here, and then you start working in the round. It was fine, but it was a bit fiddly, and if I had to do that every time I wanted to start a sock, that wouldn't have interested me. So then I discovered that there was such a thing as Judy's Magic Cast On, and so I tried that out on these socks. These are probably one of my, these are such a favourite of mine. I think they're almost my favourite pair of socks, which doesn't mean I wear them the most, probably because they're my favourite. They were one of my absolute favourites ever to knit. I just love them. This is yarn from the Cozy Knitter. This was my first ever indie dyed self-striping yarn that I bought. This is the Suits Aren't For Everyone colourway, and I just love it. And it's funny because I don't really like orange, but the moment she showed this on their podcast, they had the Dye Another Day podcast, I had to have it, and I went and bought it straight away. So her yarn comes as you get a skein, which is not a full 100 gram skein. I think it's about 85 grams skein of the self-striping colourway, and you get a 30 gram mini to do heels, toes and cuffs, which is more, all of that was more than enough for me, of the other colours. You get 115 grams of yarn in total. She has an 80-20 superwash merino nylon high twist blend. It is plump. It was my first experience of, you know, this plump sock yarn that people talk about. I love it. I tend not to buy 75-25 sock yarn anymore. 75-25 merino nylon sock yarn out of commercials are always like that, but they're plumper, I find. Often I find indie dyed yarn, which is 75-25. I just don't enjoy knitting with it as much. If an indie dyer has an 80-20 blend, I will go for that always. I just love it. So you can see these have got plenty of fluff picked up on them. That's because I guess when I wash my socks, I don't then spend the time to pick off the fluff. Anyway, perhaps we should more interestingly see. So this is not pills, most of this. This is stuff that has stuck onto the sock when it was washing, I guess. You can see up here that this is a very soft yarn. It made quite a halo and a fuzz since I wore it, but there are not pills really forming off it. Occasionally one's formed, but it's not a whole lot. And I do wear these. They're again longer, so I tend to wear them in my boots. This was my first time doing an afterthought heel, a true afterthought heel. So I picked up the stitches and cut. It fits me decently. It doesn't fit me the very, very best. That's just the truth. So what else can I say about these? Yeah, I knit them toe up and I used 56 stitches. I believe it's 56, not 52, because I'd calculated then. I'd understood the whole thing about negative ease. I measured my how wide my foot was, and I calculated based on an average sock gauge what I should cast on, and that was right. I was really happy with that. So I adore these socks. I have another skein of Christina the Cozy Knitter's sock yarn, and I can't wait to cast it on. I mean, they're just so soft, and they have a weight to them. There's more substance to them. I really, really, really love them so much. Sorry. So that's those. The next socks I knit were, I can't remember which one of these pairs they were. They feel like they knit them at the same similar time. So I'm just going to quickly show you the first pair of really shorty socks I knit. I knit these for my daughter. Aren't they adorable? These are Rose City Rollers. She still has not worn these because when I finished them, I discovered the foot was too long. So I knit one, realised it was too long, so I knit the other one anyway, so that I have a pair. And I knit her a smaller pair in exactly the same yarn because she picked the yarn. She wanted this yarn. And I can't remember which size I chose from the Rose City Rollers, from the smaller sizes. I mean, it was almost, I think, the smallest adult size in terms of cast on. Obviously, the foot length is shorter. The ones that she's now got, she's kind of growing out of. I think she's almost ready for these. I think we tried them on the other day, and maybe there's like, if she was half a centimetre longer in the foot, they'd be about perfect. So these are beautiful. This was my first ever, and still my only ever. Can you see that? You just see there's a bit of stellina in there. This is yarn from Young Yarns. Young as in you are young, not old. And she's based in the UK. This is her I always get this colourway name wrong. Who needs pixie dust when you've got yarn, or when you have yarn? It's just beautiful. It's a cream, I think it's natural undyed base, just with tons and tons of speckles. It was so much fun to knit. Obviously there's a bit more pinky than anything else here, but you also, I just remember loving when I came up to like, where are they? Up to these turquoisey speckles, where I'd suddenly get a pure hot pink one, or a neon. These were a lot of fun to knit. So those were my first ever Rose City Rollers. I knit another pair immediately after for her with this yarn. I have never knit a pair for myself. I may still do that. Anyway, so these are still in the drawer waiting, and I think she'll be starting to use them very soon. So I then knit my first ever socks on 9-inch circulars. So I got a 9-inch circular from last year's Get Your Yarn Wishes Granted. I asked if anyone had a 9-inch circular, and someone, well, my friend Vicky, Vicky Bird Designs, said she did. She didn't much like it, and but it was a 2mm. Don't love 2mm, but I thought, well, I'll give it a go. So I had also recently received an instalment of the Hedgehog Fibers Yarn Club. So this is the twist sock, or just the twist base from Hedgehog Fibers. Piece of advice, if anybody didn't know this already. Hedgehog Fibers sell a yarn which is called sock. I believe it is 90% merino, 10% nylon. It's very thin, and I would not recommend it for socks. I believe on their website they say that they don't recommend it for socks. Yeah, it's really just, it's a sock weight yarn, but that is people should be using for shawls or other things. You can knit socks with it, people have, but I hear a lot of people complain about it and say, why is this called a sock yarn? It's not really a great sock yarn. It's not a bad yarn. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying it's not a great sock yarn. So if you're looking to buy Hedgehog Fibers and you want to make socks, you should use their twist base. I have a feeling someone said that they're discontinuing it, which sounds crazy. I hope that means they're bringing out another sock base. So this sock base is a 75-25, might be 80-20. Anyway, I believe it's a 75-25 BFL nylon. It's great. It feels nice. It is still thin and skinny. Hedgehog Fibers yarns are, they just really are, not the DK weight, but all their fingering weight yarns, their sock, their twist, and their skinny singles all feel thinner than you would kind of expect other ones to. They all feel on the lighter side, even though they have the same grams and put up and everything, which I just mean in this case, again, it's BFL, it's a dense fibre, it's high twist, it has beautiful stitch definition. I wear these socks a lot. Of course, on the bottom side of the foot, again, fluff and general yuck. These are clean, I promise. You can still see that they have great stitch definition. It's a bit more pushed together. But on the top of the sock, it's just beautiful. This was a colourway called All That. Again, in case you don't know, Hedgehog Fibers Club colourways are not repeatable. You can't buy this colour. You can look for it on Ravelry if you want it from someone's D-stash. It was a lovely colour. I really, really, really enjoyed it. What you might notice I'm doing here is holding a lot of sock. This isn't knit on a 9-inch circular. That means, while the sock doesn't need to be 9 inches in circumference, it can be less. The stitches stretch while you're knitting it. Okay, not ideal. But it means there's only so small a circumference you can knit with these. My feet are too narrow. I cannot knit socks with 9-inch circulars for my feet, because to have enough stitches to knit comfortably around that needle, the socks are too big for me. I still wear these because they're not too long, so they stay on okay, but I can feel them moving a bit, and here especially, look, I mean, they're just baggy, baggy, baggy. Anyway, I still love them. I wear them a lot. They're hard wearing. This is a I think it's not official. It might be a fish lips kiss heel. Otherwise, it's just a German short row heel. I can't really remember, but it's a short row heel. I knit it cuff down. Anyway, I love the yarn. I like the twist base. I have another skein of the twist base, again from a club colourway, which I'm looking forward to knitting socks with. I will be knitting socks with that. But yeah, this made me understand why I can't use 9-inch circulars. Because I think I cast on 60 stitches. That was like the minimum I could manage to knit with this. And what I probably could do is if I had bigger 9-inch circulars, like 2.75s, I could probably knit sport weight socks for myself with 9-inch circulars, and they would be okay. But not with these, not with sort of normal sock weight yarn. Because the number of stitches that you have to cast on to fit around the needle means that they are too big for me. Lesson learned. So then I knit these socks. These, I call them my sunshine and rainbow socks. They are knit out of yarn. Predominantly, the main yarn here is from Yarn Inc. Yarn Inc is in Canada. These, I believe, again, are 56 stitches. I get confused if I use 56 or 54, to be honest. I think in the past, I think I have used 54. As you might notice on this cuff, I didn't talk about the cuffs in the other ones. I tend to prefer a 2x1 rib, which is a multiple of 3. So you need a multiple of 3 first. But then I will adjust my stitch count normally by going down a stitch so that I have the even stitch count that I then want to use for the rest of the sock. This was also a club colourway from Yarn Inc. At the time, she said she did not repeat club colourways. Now she does. So you could see, this was the August 2016 colourway. There's a bit of fluff, you see. That is a pill. That sort of made a big pill all together there. So maybe she will make this. It's a beautiful pale sky blue with rainbow. I mean, the colours are getting a bit like blanded out here. They're made to look a bit more similar here than they are. This is all the colours of the rainbow in the speckles, and it's beautiful. For this, I used, this mini is from Rosie's Moments. She's a UK-based dyer. She does a lot of sock yarn, but also a lot of, I keep moving, it's really annoying. I'm realising that now, sorry. She does a lot of mini skein sets, gradients, which are just great for heels, toes and cuffs. So I had one of those sets, and I used the yellow one here. And I really like this sock. It's got the right kind of length of cuff for me to be comfortable. I do like longer cuffs sometimes, but not always. Yeah, so I really like these socks, and these fit me pretty well. Again, they have an afterthought heel, I think these ones. Yes, these have an afterthought heel. I didn't say before. And this is when I tried this afterthought heel with the single decrease line. Not a single decrease line, because that's when you do a central double decrease. But this is, again, in the smooth operator sock pattern from Susan B. Anderson. She has several options, and one of them is that you make, normally you would knit across like 3 stitches before the end, make your decrease, knit 1, if you're doing magic loop. There you go, and then you knit 1, knit 2 together, knit to the last 3 stitches, SSK, knit 1. And that's what I have normally done, and that's what I did. Here we go, I can make you a direct comparison. That's what I did here, right? So you end up with this, what looks like 4 stitches across, because you have your decreasing edge, and you have your knit 1 for the beginning and the end of each needle. In this case, I tried to do an option which I had seen, which I think was in the smooth operator pattern. Pretty sure it was, maybe not. Maybe I just invented it. Anyway, where you just got your decrease. So you would decrease right at the end of the needle and decrease right at the beginning. Oh dear, this is my usual lack of ability here. Okay. But anyway, you can see that there is not what appears to be a column of 4 stitches there. Words. Anyway, I don't like it. If you can see, I don't get ladders when I knit magic loop, really. But I got a ladder here because I was making a decrease right on the beginning and the end. Won't be doing that again. Learnt my lesson. So anyway, apart from that, I do very much enjoy these socks. I knit my daughter almost identical pair of socks. Hers, I did not do any contrasting colour for the cuff, so I knit the cuff in the same yarn, and I did the toes and heels different. So I think I did the toe yellow in hers, and the heel was like a bright blue. I showed those off on the podcast not that long ago now. Okay, the final pair of socks I'm going to show you is a pair of socks which I knit with Regia yarn. This was the Perfect yarn, so this yarn which helps you to make perfectly matching socks, even though they're not just self-striping, they're more self-patterning. And this is their cotton blend. I don't remember off the top of my head exactly the blend, but it's more than 50% or around 50% cotton, and then the rest is polyamide, which is nylon, right? And polyester, I believe. So I think it's 3 things. And what you can tell, the only reason I bought this to try and actually use it is that it's not a hard, solid sock yarn. Sorry, I'm always pulling hairs off here. There is stretch in the actual yarn, so it was more forgiving to knit with. And I was interested to see how that would be, and I knit these over summer. Again, I believe I did 56 stitches here. Again, it might be 54. They were a bit weird to knit with. The yarn was a bit splitty, certainly for using, I think I used higher steels, not higher sharps, and that was a good choice. That was a very good choice, because the sharps would have split it. But it was not unpleasant to knit with. I did my first ever garter heel, which was fun. I quite like how it looks, especially in this cotton yarn. You can also see here, I didn't talk about it before. I don't think I've done it on any of the other socks I have here. I did a little mini heel flap, so where you knit a few rows and then work your heel and then pick up a couple of extra stitches here. So I have a mini tiny gusset there, if you can see that. It's quite a plump yarn. They have a feeling to them. They feel to me like they occupy more space around your foot in your shoe compared to the wool. And the wool, I don't notice them once I'm wearing it. Of course, if you're wearing really tight shoes, you don't wear your thick wool socks. But they're not that thick, actually. These feel thicker. I noticed that they're there. They're cotton, so they don't breathe. They breathe, but they have a lot of synthetics, so they don't breathe entirely. I still have, just to render a verdict on how good or bad they are. They are not bad. They're nice feeling socks. They feel soft. They feel comfortable. They were nice enough to knit. I prefer my wool socks. Again, right now we're in winter, so I'm not really thinking about these socks too much. I love how they look. I think they're really, really cool. I knit these cuff down again. I wouldn't say no to this yarn again, but I feel like I'd rather knit with wool. Anyway, these were still a lot of fun to knit. I'm really glad I tried them out, and I would recommend trying them out if you've ever had any question or wanted to knit with a cotton blend sock yarn, or you have already tried and weren't impressed with another one. I was pretty impressed with this one. Okay, and that is all the socks that I have to show you. That's definitely enough socks. Gosh, can you imagine if I'd knit more socks? There would be so much to show you. Anyway, that's enough. I've definitely talked enough. I have really enjoyed talking to you again. I cannot believe that it's mid-December, so I just have to wish everybody a really, really Merry Christmas. I hope you have a wonderful time. I love this time of year. Yes, it's a bit different now that I'm a mum and I have kids and stuff to think about, and we haven't decorated that much because there just hasn't been the time or energy, and that's a shame, but I love this time of year. I try not to get, I've never put a lot of pressure about, oh, we have to do this or we have to do that. So we've been focusing more on doing Christmas baking than Christmas decorating, and that's fine with me. We've been doing Advent crafts and things as well. Advent is a special time, and I really enjoy it. I have wonderful memories of it as a child, and I want my kids to have good memories of Advent as well. And then comes Christmas and New Year's and everything. I am aware, though, that not everyone loves this time of year. Some people aren't interested in it, fine. And other people find it actively hard. So my heart goes out to people at this time of year if they do find it hard, for whatever reason that you find it hard. There can be a huge variety of reasons. It's not that one is more serious than the other. If you find this time of year hard, I just hope that you do. I just hope that you're not hard on yourself for it. If you're finding it hard, I hope you do what you can manage to do and cope with, and that you do try and find joy in the small things, because for me, that's what Christmas is about. It's not really about all the big stuff. It's about the small things. So with that, I'm going to say goodbye to you all. I wish you a really, really happy time over the coming holidays to knit and be with your family. And if you're gifting people stuff, I hope it goes well. I hope you finish and you don't give them something with needles on it. Although, hey, if they're your family and they love you, they don't care. So just have a wonderful time with plenty of wool. And I really look forward already to seeing you guys in the new year.